Just after May 10th, 2025, a call came into the Collier County Sheriff's Office from a worried neighbor in Immokalee, Florida. She told dispatch that 2 dogs at a home on 1052 Hamilton Street were in serious danger. One of them, she said, was already dead. The other was barely hanging on. She also let deputies know that she had stepped in to give the surviving dog food and water because nobody else was doing it.
Welcome to Love and Murder. Heartbreak to homicide. It's Florida Man Friday, and today we're going into another case out of Florida. One that's disturbing, complicated, and hard to wrap your head around. Warning, this case contains animal abuse. Listener discretion is definitely advised for this one.
Before we get started, remember that this show is completely listener-funded. If you want to help us keep telling these stories with the victims at the center, join us over on patreon.com/loveandmurder. Kai put out 2 bonus episodes yesterday. A raw Kai rants about a man hiding out in a self-driving taxicab's trunk, and an article she wrote about a coward father who saved himself but left his toddler daughter to burn to death. Patreon.com/loveandmurder. Now you can sign up for free where you do get some extras, or you can jump into a bonus tier to get extra cases, ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and all the content we don't share anywhere else. Patreon.com/loveandmurder.
All right, let's get back into today's Florida Man Friday case.
The woman's complaint was immediately passed to Collier County Domestic Animal Services and Animal Control, and that's what set this entire case in motion. The next morning, on May 11th, animal control officers and deputies went out to the house. They first met with the same neighbor who confirmed that both dogs, the one who was still alive and the one who wasn't, were still in the backyard. Officers tried knocking on the front door, but nobody answered. Luckily, the neighbor living next door allowed officers into their yard so they could see what was happening behind the fence. At 9:22 a.m., the deputy on scene documented exactly what he saw. Behind the house was a makeshift enclosure, a small plastic fencing piece bent into a rectangle. The panels had holes in them, so officers could see inside. What they didn't see was equally important. The enclosure had no roof. That meant no shelter, no shade, and nothing to protect the dogs from the Florida heat. The deputy wrote that at the time of the inspection, the enclosure was in direct sunlight. Inside that pen were the 2 animals the neighbor had reported. Ally, a 2-year-old black and white Boston Terrier, was lying on her right side and not moving. The other dog, a tiny terrier puppy weighing just 5 pounds, about 6 to 7 months old, was barking. Officers would later identify him as Blackie. There was a bowl inside the pen, but officers couldn't tell if it had food or if it was completely empty. What they did know was that one dog was dead and the other was distressed, so they made the decision right there to intervene and get Blackie out. While deputies were in the process of requesting a search warrant, 30-year-old Guadalupe Garcia Jr. arrived home. He told officers that his wife was inside the residence, though he couldn't explain why she hadn't answered the door. Once the warrant was served, deputies asked him about the dogs. Guadalupe said he took care of them and gave them food and water every night. He also explained that he kept the dogs in the pen during the day, but he didn't bring them inside the night before because their cage was dirty and he hadn't had time to clean it. When a deputy pressed him on when he last checked on the animals, Guadalupe first answered that he had checked on them during the early morning of Saturday, May 10th. The deputy reminded him that Ally had already been dead since that morning, which didn't fit with his story. At that point, Guadalupe changed his answer. He said he had gone outside to make sure the dogs had food and water, but admitted he did not check on them. Meanwhile, Blackie was rescued immediately and taken for veterinary care. Guadalupe eventually agreed to surrender both Ally and Blackie. A necropsy was performed on Ally, and the findings showed that she likely died from heat stroke. The sheriff's office clarified this further, saying,
Histopathology did not reveal any toxins or diseases that contributed to the death of the animal.
There were no hidden medical issues, no sudden unexplained illness, just heat, exposure, and neglect. The veterinarian treating Blackie reported that, quote, Blackie would have suffered an unnecessarily painful death as a result of the heat stroke, had officers not intervened when they did. On Tuesday, September 2, 2025, deputies took Guadalupe into custody. He was transported to the Immokalee jail center for booking and processing. He posted bond and was released the same day. Guadalupe was charged with 1 felony count of aggravated animal cruelty and 2 misdemeanor counts of confinement of an animal without sufficient food or water. Collier County Sheriff Kevin J. Rambosk released a statement that said,
"Animal cruelty has no place in Collier County. We will continue to hold offenders accountable and make sure no animal suffers needlessly in our community."
Court records show that Guadalupe was scheduled for arraignment on September 29, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. But Kai hasn't seen any other updates so far. The charges themselves make it clear how severe the state considers the neglect that killed Ally and nearly killed Blackie.
This case is a painful example of how fast neglect turns fatal. One dog died lying in direct sunlight in a roofless pen. The other was minutes or hours away from the same outcome. A neighbor saw something wrong and made the call that ultimately saved Blackie's life. And now the legal system will determine the consequences of what happened behind that fence on Hamilton Street. And since this case is still ongoing, I want to mention that everything said here is alleged.
That's where we're going to leave this case. It's one that sticks with you, and it raises a lot of uncomfortable questions. We'd really like to know what you think about the case, the decisions that were made, and how this could have been prevented. Let us know your thoughts below or over in the Patreon. Patreon.com/loveandmurder. If you want to support the show and help us continue telling these stories with the victims at the center, you can do that over in the Patreon, patreon.com/loveandmurder. Your support directly funds this podcast and allows us to cover more cases, go deeper when it matters, and keep this show independent and listener-supported.
Thank you for listening all the way through, and thank you for supporting Love and Murder. We'll see you in the next episode.